Hey there, I'm Zimnoch, and in this episode, we're going to talk about how to screen an offer before you counter. So in the last episode, I talked about how to respond to an offer, because to me, negotiating starts the moment I receive one. And the two things I talked about was the story of their client and my client, and then I also talked about handling objections. Once those two are done and the conversation is clear and communication has happened, this third thing that I go into on the same phone call, this is the same phone call, I go into the terms of the contract. Now I shift my energy and ask line by line why they did what they did. And usually I leave the price out at this point, right? Because I already covered that in their other communication about their story and all that. So the price I kind of leave out and I go into the terms. And let me give you an example, because this actually is a really good one. This is an offer that had quite a bit of question marks that I had. I was like, so I got this offer. I did what I went through the story. I went through handling objections. But then I was like, listen, can you tell me about this $200,000 down payment? Right? So this was a $423,000 offer on the property, but they were going to bring $200,000 to the table when it closes, and then the rest will be a loan, right? But they didn't give me proof of funds. So I was like, where is this $200,000 coming from? Right? So that was like kind of a red flag for me. Like, okay, I need an answer to that, right? Then she had $3,000 in closing costs that they asked for my seller to contribute. So that to me was like, well, that's odd, because they're offering $423,000 with $200,000 of it being in cash. Why would they need my client to give money for closing costs? Like, don't they have the cash? Like, do they need $3,000 to cover closing costs? Like, the story wasn't making sense to me. And then I looked at the initial deposit and it was $2,000. I'm like, well, that really doesn't make sense. Like $2,000 initial deposit on a $400,000 home? Like the norm, like minimal is like 1%. Like at least I would like to see 1%, right? Which would be like $4,000 or $5,000 on this property. So $2,000 is like alarming. Like, okay, what is the strength of this buyer? Like, I'm so confused. Like, they're putting $2,000 initial deposit. They're asking for $3,000 for closing costs from my seller, but they yet have $200,000 that they're going to bring to the closing in cash. I was so confused. And I didn't get the pre-approval letter, and I didn't get the proof of funds. So it's like, so I just started digging. I was like, hey, Mrs. Agent, this was a she. I'm like, can you tell me more about this? Well, after our conversation, what I found out was the fact that this client was actually selling one of his properties to a family member. So they were selling a property from which they were going to get cash that they were going to then use to buy my client's house. I was like, wait a minute. So your client is getting money. So technically, even though it's a family transaction, that is a sale. So now that offer that she submitted is a contingent offer upon the sale of that house. Yes, it's a family transaction, but it's still a sale. There is going to be a deed that transfers. So that in California, and I would assume in every state, requires an additional document that should be attached to the offer, which is a contingency of a sale of a property. So after talking to the agent, we realized like, hey, we're going to actually need that document from you in order to make this offer valid. Because right now, you're saying that your client can buy this house with not have to sell anything, but that's not really the true story here, right? Because, and the reason I was finding this out, because I was like, where is this $200,000 coming from? I need proof of funds. She's like, oh, it's from the sale of their house. I'm like, well, okay, well then I need to know, what is that house? When is it selling? I need more information, because really that's my proof of funds, right? So that's how we came to that conclusion, right? And I answered that question. So then I was like, so is this why they want $3,000 in closing costs and they only are putting down $2,000? Don't they have a little bit more money? She's like, no, actually, you know what? They are really strapped with cash. All of their money is in that house that they're selling to their family member. And they love this house. It's a he, loves this house. He wants to stay close to family, but he wants to buy this house in particular. I'm like, all right, well, now it's making sense. I'm like, okay, so they will have the money, they will have the cash, but he's not liquid now. So that's why he's putting only $2,000 down and he's asking for closing costs. I'm like, fine. Okay, now at least the story makes sense, right? Imagine if I didn't do this and I called my client, my seller, and say, hey, here's the terms I got. Like, the first thing he would be asking me, like, whoa, what, do we know anything about this? So I need to be proactive and I got to get all this information before I can even call my seller and say, hey, here's the offer. Here's the story of the buyer. Here's the objections that I had to handle. And here's the offer terms, and here's all the answers to why, right? So interestingly enough, what happened with this offer, as we were doing the research, right, not countering, we didn't even counter yet. I was like, look, I need the document from you, Mrs. Agent, of the contingency. I need proof of funds a loan approval, right? I need all this stuff. So that took a few days for her to gather. Guess what happened? We got another offer. As we were doing the research, due diligence, we got an offer, and now I had more leverage, right? Now, because of me doing the digging, I was able to buy a little bit more time, got another offer, and then all of a sudden, I was able to basically get both offers to come much, much higher when we were countering. So that allowed me to do that. And interestingly enough, we did open escrow with them, and with this offer, and the moment we opened escrow, the agent called me like, Randy, here's the situation. I just talked to the lender again. They need 3 more weeks. They actually need an extension of 3 weeks from what we agreed upon. I'm like, wow, 2 days into closing, like into opening escrow, like this is what you're requesting? That was a red flag. So we canceled that escrow, went with the backup that we had in place that was strong, right, in backup position. Guess what? The day after we opened escrow with the backup, the agent calls me, my buyer got cold feet. I'm like, what? The buyer got cold feet, so now we canceled that escrow. And the reason I'm telling you this story, because this is what goes on in this real estate world. But to make this even more interesting, is that now a few weeks went by, and the agent that submitted this offer that I just talked to you about, I am now in communication with that agent because she actually was able to convince her client to use her in-house lender to make them and package them in a way where she will feel 100% confident in their performing on purchase of my client's house. And she's supposed to resubmit an offer today, literally. So we might actually end up back in escrow with the same buyer that we were in escrow to begin with, that we ended up canceling on. So by screening the offer the way I just described, right, between the last episode and this episode, you can position your client to understand exactly how to counter and create a win-win situation. Analyzing a property before you buy it is obviously very important. However, what I find that most people just do it wrong. And I know that alone, one mistake could cost you tens and thousands of dollars. It could literally cost you your business. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I created a step-by-step property analysis guide sheet to walk you through exactly what to look for to make sure your deal that you're looking at is worth buying. To get the property analysis guide sheet, just go to randyzimnoch.com.